Start off. Om Sadashiva
Shankaracharya
Asmadacharya Vande Guru Parampara. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Okay, so we completed verse number 55, and I had said that Krishna was basically giving the lakshanam, the indicators of a jnani. So we'll look at the next one also, 56. So let us chant. Dukkheshvanudvignamanaha Sukheshu vigatasprihaha Vitaraga bhayakrodaha Itadir muniruchyate. Okay. Now, please, I'll just mute all of y'all. Okay. So let's look at the grammar portion. Dukkheshu anudvigna manaha sukheshu vigatasprihaha vita raga bhaya krodaha sthitadihi munihi uchyate. And the anvaya is dukkheshu anudvigna manaha sukheshu vigatasprihaha Vita raga bhaya krodaha munihi sthitadihi uchyate. So dukheshu, in sorrowful times, udvignamanaha. Udvignamanaha is one whose mind is disturbed. Anudvignamanaha is one whose mind is not disturbed. So in sorrows, this jnani, his mind is not disturbed. Sukheshu vigatasprihaha. In happy times, for happiness, he has no longing. Vigata spraha. Spraha means to long for. So Vigata spraha, he has no longing for the happiness. He doesn't want to hold on to them. Vita, free from what all? Raga, bhaya, krodaha. Raga, attachment, bhaya is fear, krodha, anger. Free from attachment, fear and anger. Munihi. Munihi is that wise person, is called sthitadihi, a person whose intellect is firm. Uchyate is called. So one who is not affected by sorrowful times, who has no longing for pleasures, who is free from attachment, fear and anger, is said to be a person whose knowledge is steady. That is the description he gives. So it's clear that from the following verses that the jnani also has his own prarabdha karma to work out. So he cannot avoid unfavorable situations. In fact, the very birth of the body is because of prarabdha. And therefore, since I said earlier that prarabdha is the very glue because of which the body is there. So until death happens, until the body dies, punyam and papam are going to affect the body. Okay. So jnani, because he is jnani, he has realized that he is not a karta. There is no fresh punya papam being created, which means he does not acquire any more agami karma. But whatever karma is there already in the body, for the prarabdha karma because of which the body is born, that he cannot escape. and they are going to, those prarabdha karmas are going to affect him in both favorable and unfavorable forms. So for him, there will be unfavorable situations, there will be favorable situations. And when these come, anudvigna manaha, the jnani's mind is not disturbed. It's emotionally strong, disturbance are minimal, because he has got this shock absorber, which we call jnanam. And how does this strength of mind come around? So many people think that, 7 days of Gita and my mind should become strong. It doesn't work like that. The Gita has to be assimilated. We have to learn to assimilate the teaching. We have to again and again and again listen to the teaching, and we have to learn to assimilate. As and when the assimilation takes place, which assimilation is a very slow process. It is not going to happen in 1 day or 2 days or 10 days or 20 days or 10 months. It takes years to assimilate. And therefore, that is why in our tradition, Shravanam is a long-standing thing. We go on for years and years and years doing the same Shravanam. Not necessarily the same text, but the teaching is always the same. Whatever the Upanishad is, whatever Bhagavad Gita is, whatever the Prakarana Grantha is, there is no change in the teaching. And therefore, every time you listen, every time you do Mananam, the teaching is digested better. Assimilation takes place, and it's a very, very slow and gradual growth. So it's not that the mind will overnight become very strong. But yes, gradually, the mind becomes strong. So a question arises. How do I know whether the Gita is working on me? So there is a measuring stick, which we call the FIR. I think Meda must have told you in your Tattva class. But anyway, we'll dwell on it because it's a very, very useful measuring rod. So FIR, generally, of course, it's the first information report, right, in the police. And for this actually is an information report for us, by which we measure our own disturbances of mind. So F stands for the frequency of the mental disturbances. How often do I get disturbed? Previously, before I started the class, I used to lose my temper, let us say 15 times a day. And I get disturbed because of what? My son's behavior, my daughter's behavior, my wife's behavior, the neighbor's behavior, the milkman's behavior, the postman's behavior, everybody's behavior disturbs me. And therefore, the mental disturbances which I have are many, many and very significant, right? So that is a previous frequency, 10, 15, 20 times a day. What do I do? I take a spreadsheet, which I can lock with a very, very strong password. So nobody else will see the spreadsheet. And then I write, day number 28th of November, I had disturbances 30 times a day, 30 times today. That's a frequency. And I don't just mean, anger alone. Any disturbance of mind, any emotion which is strong, which has disturbed your mind, that you have to note. That mind was disturbed so many times. So F stands for that. Second is intensity of the mental disturbance. So do I just get irritated? Or do I start throwing stones and plates at people? Right? So when the intensity is low, there is only, it's like a small stone being thrown into a lake. There's a small ripple of reaction, and in the mind, minor irritation is there. And sometimes even with just the intellectual capacity to appreciate the disturbance is not necessary, that you can get rid of it. But when the intensity of the mental disturbance is very strong, then it overflows into the words. You start to say things which later on you're going to regret. So the organ of speech is affected. You use very, very strong, powerful words. You curse people, you hurt people. You shout out all those things. You shout at everybody. You say things which you would normally not have said if the disturbance was not there. All this we saw happens. And this mental disturbance can finally overflow into the body also. From the verbal state, the mental disturbance, when it is more intense, can overflow into the physical body So you know very well that when somebody is very heavily disturbed, you will find that they are gasping, they are not able to breathe properly, they are shivering in anger, lips are shivering, body is shivering. And Arjuna, if you remember, experienced all this in the first chapter we saw. Sidanti mama gatrani mukham cha parishusyati vepatyuscha sharire me roma harshascha jayate. So he says, my limbs are trembling, my mouth is drying, my hair is standing on end. So all physical symptoms of mental disturbance. So from the mental disturbance, it flows into the words, into the organ of speech. From the organ of speech, it flows into the actions also. So affects manaha, vakaha, and kayaha. Body, the mind, words, and the body. All it can affect. So what is the intensity I need to note on? We can always say a scale 1 to 10. 10 being when you start hurling things at people. Okay, plates are being flying around in the kitchen. That is 10. And 1 is okay, just get a slight irritation. You say, I should not be doing this. So note that down. How many times a day I have been disturbed? Each one of those disturbances, what was the intensity on a scale of 0 to 10? Okay. The third one is when I get disturbed. Okay, it has happened. And how long does it take me before I recover my cool, before I'm back to normal? Am I upset the whole month? Or am I upset the whole week? Or am I upset only for a couple of hours? Or I get upset and do I recover almost immediately? Or sometimes I'm upset the whole lifetime also. So this recovery period should become less and less. The intensity should become less and less. The frequency should become less and less. So this decreasing FIR is the sign of the Atma Jnanam, or the teaching of the Gita, getting converted into emotional strength. The entire purpose of the teaching of the Gita is not academic. It is not meant to make you a good professor. It is meant to convert it, should be digested, and the digestion will strengthen your mind. So this decrease in FIR is the sign of all the teaching getting converted into emotional strength. And a jnani is one who has a good, strong mind. Now remember one caveat over here. This FIR is meant only for judging yourself. Okay, don't use it as a measuring stick to judge your family members or anybody else. It is meant for me to judge myself, whether I am progressing in my sadhana, whether this sadhana of regular Shravanam and Mananam, is it giving me any benefit at all? That is going to be measured by this FIR stick. You can actually make it Excel sheet, as I said. And if you do it over a couple of years, you'll be surprised at how much change actually happens. The advantage of measuring this, putting it in an Excel form or in any sort of a document, is that you're actually able to see what changes have taken place. Otherwise, the changes are so small that one tends not to notice. So what happens is, finally, this has to result in stronger mind, more emotional and healthy mind, more emotionally strong and healthy mind. And the jnani is one who has got this good, strong mind. And therefore Krishna says, Dukkeshu anudvigna manaha. In unfavorable situations, his mind is not affected. Sukheshu vigata spraha. In favorable conditions, in pleasurable conditions, he is not unnecessarily carried away. There is no longing for holding on to the pleasures. So agate swagatam. When the pleasures come, he is happy. When it goes away, he is okay with it. When it doesn't hold on to it. Now remember that dukham and sukham, sorrow and pleasure, they all have three sources: adhyatmika, adi bhautika, adi daivika. Adhyatmika means sources which are internal to me. My own thoughts, my own experiences coming up, sources which are internal to me. Adi bhautika means that sorrow is triggered off by the behavior of other people around me. So bhautika, other people around me. And adi daivika, that is which is not inside me also, that which is not triggered by other people, but triggered by acts of God. So earthquake comes, or a plague comes, not a natural disaster. It comes. What do you do? A flood comes. So these three areas are sources of disturbances. And when you say that dukkeshu anudvigna manaha, you are saying that disturbances from any of these three sources, they will not bother the jnani too much. In short, he is balanced, he is dispassionate. And therefore only vitaraga bhaya krodhaha, free from the basic emotional problems, which is ragaha, attachment, emotional dependence, samsara. So we saw samsara, raga, shoka, moha. The first line is discussing samatvam, vitaraga bhaya krodhaha. Which means what? A mind which is balanced. And each of these words is, you can write a book on each of these words. It's very, very important. It is very useful to us for reflection, for introspection. Where am I going with my sadhana? So here, we are using three different words. In chapter 1, what was described as samsara? What three emotions?
Raga, Dvesha, Moha.
Raga, Shoka, Moha.
Raga, Shoka, Moha.
Shoka, Moha.
Was defined as samsara. Here, Krishna is defining it using different set of words. Raga is common, but raga, bhaya, krodha. So another route to samsara. So raga we discussed very extensively in the first chapter. Bhayam. Bhayam comes out of raga, because raga means I am attached, I am dependent. Whenever I am attached to something, that is the raga, right? And the more dependent I am, the more I am insecure. Because why? Because if I depend upon the whole world itself is insecure. How can I get security from an insecure source? And therefore I am afraid. Bhayam. So raga straight away leads to bhayam. So we say yatra yatra raga, tatra tatra bhayam. Wherever there is raga, there is constant fear running in your mind. And there is a special significance to bhayam. As long as we have Dvaitam in our vision, as long as duality is not destroyed, bhayam will be there. Why? Why do I say that as long as duality is there, fear will be there?
Because there'll be someone else.
There will be someone else. So Shastra says very nicely, Dutiyad bhayam. Wherever there is a duality, wherever there is a second one available, there will be bhayam. And therefore, as long as you think of yourself and the world as different, and even if you think of yourself and the Lord as different, I am different from the Lord, is basically a breeding ground for fear only, because you are afraid of the Lord, because he is different from you. The next one is what? Krodhaha, anger. So directly proportional to raga is anger. When I want to hold on something, somebody will come and prevent that. There are some obstacles, and every obstacle will result in frustration and make me angry, right? So even people whom we want to be close to you, when that person is away from you or wants to go away from you, get angry. Therefore, raga leads to anger. And because of this if he is a jnani, because of the fact that he is self-sufficient, he is not having any emotional dependence upon anybody. A jnani's main defining characteristics we saw, that he doesn't ask for love from anybody. He gives love because he is self-sufficient. Out of that purnatvam, out of that fullness of his nature, he can give love. But he doesn't have to ask for it. And since that self-sufficiency is there, there is no emotional dependence that the jnani has. So wherever there is no ragaha, no attachment, you will find there is freedom from fear and anxiety. And such a person, says Krishna, he says, Thitadihi munihi uchyate. That person is established in his wisdom, Thitadihi, established in the intellect, in his wisdom, and munihi is a sage, uchyate is said to be. So this is the definition of a muni, the person who is established in his own nature, who is sufficient, happy by himself. Right? A person who is happy by himself. And where did we see that earlier? We saw that a person who is happy by himself, in himself, who doesn't require any form of, who has absolutely no dependence upon anything external for his mental calm, for the calmness of his mind, for his happiness, he doesn't depend upon anything external. That person is a real sage, is a real jnani, nobody else. So you don't have to go to a forest and sit with closed eyes. You don't have to have a beard, and you don't have to be a yogi sitting in a forest with that danda in your hand, with a stick in your hand. External transformations, is Krishna is saying, do not guarantee you any freedom from samsara. It is your internal transformation that brings about freedom. And for the one who has brought about this internal transformation, he is a sage. He is a sage. And we saw this earlier in the 55th verse. Atmani eva atmana tushtaha. He is happy by himself, in himself. And so after bringing about this internal transformation, you can very much be in the world of activity. You can be coated and booted and suited. You can be investment banker, but you will still be a muni. You will still be a jnani. So muni is mananath muni, the one who has got the right knowledge in his mind. He is muni. And how did he become the jnani, the muni? Because of thitadihi, that established himself in the knowledge. What kind of knowledge? We saw the knowledge of Shravanam and Maranam, which has been converted into emotional strength. So Krishna uses the word Sthitadihi here, connect to Arjuna's word Sthita Prajnasya in verse number 54. Sthitadihi is another word for Sthira Prajnaha. So not only is he intellectually strong, because of the fact that he has completely assimilated the knowledge, he is able to defend any questions upon the basic philosophy. Shastram deals with knowledge, not belief. Right? Knowledge means clarity. And because this knowledge has been converted into emotional strength also, this jnani, he enjoys peace of mind. He is calm, he is well balanced. And that is what Krishna is saying. The main traits, main character of a jnani is balance of mind. We saw earlier, samatvam yoga uchyate. Balance of mind is the main trait. Now let's look at the 57th verse. So please unmute yourself and we'll chant the 57th verse. Yes sarvatra nabhisneha.
Yes, sarvatra
Tat prapya shubha shubham. Nabhinandati nadveshti. Tasya prajna pratisthita. Okay. So, yaha, that first word, sarvatrana visneha, has to be broken. Yaha, sarvatra anabhisneha. Yaha, sarvatra anabhisneha. Tad prapya shubham ashubham. Then, na abhinandati na dveshti tasya prajna pratisthita. The anvaya will be yaha sarvatra ana abhisneha tad tad shubha ashubham prapya na abhinandati na dveshti, kama tasya prajna pratishtita, full stop. So look at the sentences. Yaha anabhisneha, the one who is without attachment, where sarvatra, in all situations. And what is his characteristic? Prapya, whatever he gains. Prapya tat tat. So tat tat means pleasure, and one tat is pleasure, the other tat is pain. Also one tat is shubham, the other tat is ashubham. So prapya, pleasure and pain, having gained pleasure and pain, shubham ashubham. Tat shubham, tat ashubham. So whatever is there, one is papyam, pleasure, one is pain. What does he do? Na abhinandati. He does not rejoice. Na dveshti. He does not hate also. And therefore, tasya prajna pratishtita. His knowledge, tasya prajna, his knowledge is pratishtitaha, well established. So, sarvatra anabhisneha. One who is not fixated onto any person, obsessed with any person, any situation, or any object. So in Sanskrit, the word sneha has two meanings. One is love and affection. That is sneha. Yeah. Another meaning is anything oily is also called sneha. An oily, sticky substance is sneha. But here we are using it in the first meaning. So love and affection is sneha. Abhisneha is attachment. Sneha is to be fond of somebody, but to be attached to somebody is abhisneha. Okay. Now, sarvatra abhisneha, anabhisneha. Sarvatra abhisneha means his mind is so weak that anywhere he goes, he wants to hold on. Sarvatra anabhisneha means his mind is very, very strong. Sarvatra anabhisneha. He is not attached. His mind is very strong. He is independent. Right? And we know how easy it is for us to get attached. You can even get attached to a cup of coffee. You take coffee for a few days. First, it's an emotional dependence. Then later on, it becomes a biological dependence. When I don't have coffee, I get a headache. And similarly, you get stuck to everything. Onto cigarettes, onto rasagullas, onto my car, onto my house, onto my people. That my, the mamakara is the result of this attachment. And here is Krishna is saying is the jnani is the person who loves everybody. He enjoys the company of all the people. He is willing to move with anybody. At the same time, he is not stuck. He is not obsessed with anybody. So this psychological freedom is anabhisneha, not attached, completely free from psychological bondages. Similarly, as I said, the jnani is not that he doesn't enjoy company. He enjoys. But when the company is not there, he does not miss anybody. And then the second quarter of the first line, tat tat prapya shubha shubham. It's very important. Shubha ashubham is papam and punyam. Sorry, punyam and papam. Shubham is punyam, papam is ashubham is papam. So very important, favorable and unfavorable situations. So here Krishna himself is saying that even the jnani cannot avoid favorable karma phalam, favorable karma results, and unfavorable karma phalam. He is a jnani, his kartritvam, sense of doership has gone. And therefore only there will be no agami karma. But he has to face prarabdha karma. Because even after knowledge, that karma will remain. The prarabdha karma will remain until the body falls away. When the body falls, the jnani becomes a videha muktaha. Until then, he is a jivan mukta. So what is clear here is that jnani will also face pleasures and pains. from favorable and unfavorable situations, right? So you will find that, all great sages, they have people who are very fond of them. They are people who, pull them down, criticize them, say all sorts of things about them, right? So there are people who will glorify the jnani. You are wonderful, you are doing a great thing. But there are people who say this, what does this jnani do? He just goes around the place and just talks. He doesn't do any work at all. He's not a productive citizen at all. He's absolutely useless. Such people, they hate Vedanta. So in fact, there's a lot of people who say that Vedanta is the cause for most of Indian problems because you don't fight for it. While we are saying something completely different. We are saying a jnani is a person of wisdom. It is not that he doesn't do what is required to be done. But whatever is the result of his actions, that jnani is not disturbed by either the result of his actions or by the behavior of other people, right? Now the problem with, not reacting to the behavior of other people, there is a problem with that also. People think that you can be made into a doormat, right? So they say people who study Vedanta, they meekly surrender to all situations and they are very weak people. Is this true? Vedanta doesn't say that you should meekly surrender to all improper behavior or to all unfavorable situations. Vedanta says have an appropriate response for each situation, right? Your response should be appropriate. It should be well thought out. It should be an action, not a reaction. So for any situation, generally, if you look at responses, we can have three types of responses. One is an impulsive response. This is the reaction. There is an immediate backlash to whatever somebody has done. You have not thought it out. You have not planned it out. There is no intellect involved. There is no discriminative faculty involved. You just impulsively react to whatever trigger is there. So that is the first response for any situation. The second response is meek surrender. Whatever other person does, he abuses me, slaps me, calls me all sorts of names, I meekly surrender. I don't take any step to remedy that at all. So Vedanta says the first two, the impulsive reaction and the meek surrender, this is not intelligent action. That is unintelligent, absolutely. The first one is unintelligent action. Impulsive reaction is unintelligent action. The second one is inaction, not doing anything. Second one is unintelligent inaction. In both cases, what is important is that discrimination power of yours, viveka, has not been used, your intellect has not been used. Both cases, one is an immediate reaction, one is a lack of any reaction at all. Both are unintelligent. Nowhere does scripture say that you should meekly suffer or surrender. Both are improper. How can you say that this is what Shastra says? What is the proof?
Krishna did tell Arjuna to fight.
Yeah, so where is Krishna teaching? Where is Krishna teaching?
In the battlefield.
In the battlefield. Right. So there itself, it's a very clear indication that you should not meekly surrender anywhere. So what is the third one? You don't react. You study the situation. You see whether there is a remedy. You give it sufficient time, sufficient thought. You don't react in an emotional manner. You do analysis. So we call it SWOT analysis: strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Any situation you do a SWOT, you will find that for certain situations there is no remedy. So if it is a situation in which there is no remedy, if the situation is choiceless, which means any choice you make, or rather you have no choices to make, the situation is presented with no remedy at all, so there is nothing you can do to remedy the situation. That is what a situation is called, choiceless situation. In such a situation, what do? You have to strengthen your mind to face the situation. In a choiceless situation, you have to accept the fact that situation is choiceless. And since the external circumstance cannot be changed, that is the very meaning, right? If it is a choiceless situation, do not try to change the external situation, which is not going to work. And that's what I mean when I say the situation is choiceless. And if you ask me, why can't I change a choiceless situation? What is the answer?
Prabal Prarabdha sometime do that.
No, because the definition of choiceless situation is that which cannot be changed. Okay. So the
I can
question,
only change myself.
yeah, so a situation
my
which you
reaction.
cannot change at all, in spite of your best actions, that is what is a choiceless situation. And when that cannot be changed, then you don't try and waste your effort changing it, because you know it is choiceless. Therefore, there is only one thing you can do. What is the intelligent response? I should not waste my time trying to change what cannot be changed. I should put forward an effort to change what can be changed, which is my own mind. So that what is the impact of changing my own mind or strengthening my own mind? The impact is that the impact of the choiceless situation will be minimized. This is intelligent action in cases where the situation is choiceless. Okay. It's a very important phrase. In cases where the situation is choiceless, which means in which case I cannot change the external environment at all, and therefore there's no point in my trying to change it. Under those circumstances, my effort should be directed at strengthening my own mind, so that whatever disaster is going to happen because of that choiceless situation, the impact on my mind will be minimized. This is intelligent action. And of course, if it is a situation which can be changed, so we said there are two situations. One is choiceless, and one which there is a choice. If there is a choice, I analyze situation, give sufficient thought, then deal with the situation. So sama, dana, bheda, danda, you can use any of these. You first use sama, then you use dana, then you use bheda, then you use danda. This is Chanakya Niti. First the discussions, then try to exchange something of value so that the situation vanishes. Try to put differentiation in the enemy's ranks, and if nothing works, then danda. Danda means action which is required in terms of punishment, or if a war if necessary. So what the Shastra says is that try not to punch someone in the nose as far as possible. But if after all your efforts, you finally come to the conclusion that you have to punch the person in the nose, you should do it carefully so that you don't miss the nose. The punch must land. What Shastra says is don't do anything impulsively. Let it be thoughtful action, like in a court of law, where sufficient time is taken, all the evidence is scrutinized, for evidence, against evidence, everything is scrutinized, and then finally a punishment is given. And if you remember the story of the Mahabharata, you will know that Krishna tried all these methods with Duryodhana. Samadana, everything was tried, it didn't work. And therefore, finally, the war came into being. Okay. All right. So now let us look at verse number 58. We will chant. Yada samharate chayam kurmonganniva sarvashaha indriyani indriyarthebhyaha tasya prajna pratisthita. Okay. All right. So to come to the grammar portion. Yada samharate cha ayam. Yada samharate cha ayam. Kurmaha. So kurmongani eva has to be broken. Kurmaha angani eva. 3 words. Kurmaha angani eva sarvashaha. Indriyanihi indriyarthebhyah tasya pragnya pratishtita. Okay. And sentences. Yada cha samharate ayam kurmaha eva angani sarvashaha. Yada eva kurmaha, when, like the turtle. Kurma is turtle. When, like the turtle. Yada eva kurmaha. What does turtle do? Samharate angani. It withdraws its legs, its limbs into itself. So this referring to the turtle's method of self-defense when faced by a threat. The turtle does just what does it do? It withdraws all the soft parts, which are the legs and its limbs, into itself, and the head also, into that hard casing of the turtle. Hard casing is not easy to attack or destroy. So it takes refuge inside the hard casing. Yada. Yada means when. When the turtle does this, similarly, I am. This person, which person? This jnani, sarvashaha indriyani, you have to supply over samharate. This person is able to withdraw all the sense organs from indriyarthebhyah, from all the sense objects. So just as the turtle completely withdraws its limbs into itself, into its body, into that hard case and becomes safe. Similarly, this person, whenever he is able to withdraw the sense organs from the sense objects, then what happens? Tasya pragnya pratishtita. His knowledge becomes firm. So in the 57th verse, he's up to the 56th verse, 57th verse, Krishna talked about what? The person who has attained jnanam and has converted that knowledge into emotional strength. Not only is he pragnya, but he is sthita pragnya also. Which means what? Not only is there intellectual information available, there is a mental transformation also available. It is not cognitive change. He has transformed his knowledge, his cognitive knowledge, he has transformed into emotional maturity. Such a person is called sthita pragnya or sthira pragnya, either way. Now from this verse, the 58th verse, Krishna is changing the topic. Up to here, up to 57 was this sthira pragnya. Now it is the sadhana. What is the discipline required? How can a person convert knowledge into emotional strength? And here, what knowledge? You have to recall the verses from 12 to 25. Verse number 12 to verse number 25. The essence of which is what? Jnana Yoga was verse number 12 to 25 of this particular chapter, or second chapter. The essence was what? Aham Purnaha. I am full and complete. If you have to give the summary of that, it is Aham Brahmasmi, which means I am Purnaha, I am full and complete. I do not require anything from anybody to be complete. So this self-knowledge, if you have received and assimilated, that has to be converted into mental strength. How to convert into mental strength? So Krishna is going to talk about 3 different disciplines or sadhanani. What are the disciplines? One is nididhyasana. So in English, it's called Vedantic meditation, nididhyasana. And what do you mean by this Vedantic meditation? It's dwelling upon the teaching. It is recalling the teaching. And what does the teaching say? That you are completely independent and purnaha. You are full by yourself. You don't require anything. You don't require any dependence. You are a completely independent person. You are happy by yourself. You do not require the external world to be happy at all. So I have to dwell on that teaching again and again and again. Every teaching which I have received about the fact that I am the Atma, that teaching I have to keep on recalling in my mind. So aham Atma, aham Purnaha, aham Shuddhaha, aham Nityaha. So I am the Atma, I am complete, I am pure, I am eternal, I do not have mortality, I am everywhere, I am the creator, I am the sustainer, I am the destroyer. All these ideas have to be dwelt upon. And so far, what did we say? Everybody told you that you need people, you need things. Without all these things, you can never be emotionally full and complete. And we never questioned that assumption, right? Like the drug user, who after some years of using drugs is so habituated that he cannot imagine his daily life without his daily dose of drugs. And he is willing to do anything to get that. Then what happens? One day he goes to a rehabilitation center and he discovers true freedom that he can do without his daily fix. Similarly, we think that life is complete because we have been programmed. People around me, things around me, money around me. So without all this environment, I think my life is incomplete. And that vasana is very, very strong. I do not ever question until, in most cases of people in this group, in the case of most people, until they went to TTC, that questioning is not there. There you question, is it necessary for me to have people? And Krishna says, this is a vasana. You have to break that vasana. What is a vasana? It is formed through repeatedly thinking about the fact that I am finite, that I need people. Over hundreds and thousands of births and years, you have been thinking the same thing. Because of the constant dwelling on the fact that you need people, that the groove in my mind has been formed, that indeed I need people. So now, Nididhyasanam is reversing that whole status. I repeatedly contemplate upon the fact that I do not need people. I do not need situations to be happy because happiness is my very nature. So in a way, these Gita classes, they are like the rehabilitation center for us. They are the rehabilitation classes for us. I have to break free of my thinking patterns. And I should tell myself that I'm using this body, but I can be without this body also. I don't say that I need things for physical survival. I say that my body needs things for surviving. My body needs food, clothing, shelter for surviving. But I don't need anything. To be happy, I don't need anything. I only need myself. So this is constant Nididhyasanam, owning up the independence, owning up the completeness of myself as Atma, as Brahman. Breaking this long established stranglehold of samsara, of the vasanas, this is Nididhyasanam. And for that Nididhyasanam, you need the support of Vedanta, which tells you that you are not the physical body. The physical body has got dependence. You are not the mind has got dependence. You are not the intellect has got dependence. You are the Atma on which everything is dependent. You are the ever independent Atma. This practice is called Nididhyasanam. This is the first sadhana, the main exercise, the main discipline, which means what? It is not that after Sunday class at 9 a.m. you stop thinking about this and thereafter pick up the thread only next Sunday at 8 a.m. That doesn't work. After class, you have to sit quietly and spend time every single day. And therefore, there are so many slokas. Mano buddhi hankara chittani naham, nacha shrotra jivhe, nacha grana netre, nacha vyoma bhumihi, na tejo na vayuhu, chidananda rupa shivoham shivoham. There are many Nididhyasana slokas written by acharyas. And what do? The essence of the teaching they present in a very short form. And that essence of the teaching I have to continuously dwell upon. Just Shravanam is not enough. And this continuous recall of all my teachings on a daily basis, whenever I am free, whenever I'm not doing anything else. And ideally, it should be 24/7. But many of us have got grihastha houses, grihastha jivan, houses to take care of, responsibilities. While you're doing something, you don't have to dwell upon it, obviously, because the attention will go away. But when you are not doing anything, when you are free, instead of watching TV or reading the newspaper, Nididhyasanam is what you should be doing. So as far as possible, your time which is not spent on productive work, any other productive work, can be spent very productively on Nididhyasana. And you'll find there are many, many Nididhyasanam slokas. In fact, Vivekachudamani also got a few slokas. So that is the first major discipline, Nididhyasana. Then Krishna adds two more, which we have seen earlier. The second one is Indriya Nigraha, regulation of the sense organs. Because until knowledge becomes steady and assimilated and therefore contributes to emotional strength. So until that period, we don't want that our mind should be fluctuating violently. Because it is a loop, a violently fluctuating mind, violent emotions will take away from Vedantic assimilation. Therefore, until the knowledge takes root and becomes the source of your emotional strength, you have to protect the mind from external disturbances. And that is done by use of regulation of sense organs as a discipline. So it's like a small plant, Initially, the plant has to be protected. Once it becomes a tree, then it is safe from attack by others. So until the knowledge becomes steady, one should not allow your mind to be disturbed by violent emotions. And all emotions enter the world through what? In what form? Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. In the form of words, in the form of touch, in the form of form, in the form of taste, in the form of smell. The five sense organs are the gateway to all emotions finally entering your mind. And therefore, I should use my discrimination. And wherever there are instances or events in the world where my mind can be disturbed, I should avoid such forms, such smells, such tastes, such sounds, such touch. This is called Indriya Nigraha. And one of the most important things here is that never get into arguments. Argument is one thing where you can get attached very easily, and therefore it can disturb the mind very, very easily. And arguments are for what? For things which have no relevance. Whether USA should have voted Biden into power or not. Whether Modi should have withdrawn the farm laws or not. All these things can evoke very strong emotional, triggers. And therefore we say that for a sadhaka, he should avoid these things. Anything that provokes raga, krodha, dvesha, kama, lobha, moha, all these provocations you should avoid. And if you're talking to somebody and if the other person is arguing with you and you find that you are getting emotionally disturbed, what you should say is that I am not ready for the discussion. You can tell very clearly that my mind is disturbed. And Swami Chinmayananda very nicely said once, in all arguments, there is only heat generated, there is no light. So wherever you get into argument, where you find that your mind is getting disturbed, it is up to you to say, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, and walk away. This is called Indriya Nigraha. So Indriya Nigraha can be combined with walking away, Dama also. If you find that that continuing in the place is going to irritate or trigger your emotions, you should leave the place. Okay. Then the third exercise is, so first exercise was what? Nididhyasana. Second exercise was restraint of sense organs. Third exercise is Mano Nigraha, regulation of the thought process, right? So initially in this Indra Nigraha, what happens is somebody is talking to you and he is arguing with you and you control their emotions. But he continues to argue, then what do? That words are still falling in your ears. Right? So then you apply Dhamma, you leave the place. So that is regulation of the thought process, trying to ensure, that your mind is not disturbed. But now once you go out, you have gone out of that particular place, you have left the place because you're arguing with you. But supposing that having left the place and having left his presence, have you been able to dismiss that from your mind? A lot of people will find that because of the hurt to your ego, that will not happen. So though you are no longer in the presence of the person with whom you had an argument, you will still dwell upon the event and you will say, oh, he said so and so to me. And you keep on saying that, you keep on building upon that, you keep on reliving that event. And finally, anger builds up. Emotion builds up. So emotion is always a build-up. No one single event can produce an emotion in a fraction of a second. Initially, it is only information. Then I process that information. The cognitive process is taking place. In the processing the information, no emotion is produced. The intellect is functioning. Then you dwell upon it. He insulted me, in front of all these people. So the mind has come into being. And that you will dwell upon not only today, you will dwell upon for hours and days and even for weeks. And therefore that little, distraction, it builds up into a powerful building, powerful structure of anger, frustration, and depression. So every emotion, every strong emotion is not one thought. It is a series of thoughts which are constructed into a very strong emotion. Then the thought build-up is in my hands. The initial emotion build-up, the initial emotion which is probably, uninvited, which is the reaction of your mind, that may not have been in your control. But you can refuse to nourish that thought. You can refuse to continue thinking along those lines and getting frustrated and the build-up of this emotion. This is called mental regulation. Right? So you have to ensure that there is a time when I sit back and say that I am not going to work on this. I am not going to let this person's disturbance or little talk or discussion bother me, and I just remove it from my mind. Whenever that thing comes, I pick up my japamala and I do my own japa. And if I do this regularly, trying to deliberately move my mind away from disturbing thoughts, this is mano nigraha, regulation of mind. And therefore, if I have both sense organ regulation and regulation of mind, if I practice them regularly, the main benefit I will get is that the mind will not have violent emotions. And when the mind is steady, that is called chitta shuddhi. It is called jnana yogyata. It is called sadhana chatushta sampannaya. Then only will the knowledge be absorbed. Therefore, 3 sadhanas are required: nididhyasanam, indriya nigraha, and mano nigraha. So Krishna is highlighting the indriya nigraha in the verses from 58 to 61. Indriya nigraha. And in this verse, Krishna gives the example. He says, example of a tortoise, a turtle. A turtle can be very easily killed because it's not aggressive. It doesn't have any way to attack somebody else. And other animals have got horns, nails, something. But the turtle does not have any weapon to fight. And therefore it can be easily killed, because of which nature has given it a protective armor, a thick shell. So the moment it sees the slightest danger, what are the 5 things which are very vulnerable? The 4 legs and the head. All these 5 are withdrawn. So 5 number is important. Why? Because we also have 5 sense organs. And the moment the threat is gone, again the turtle, brings out all these, the 4 legs and the head, and it can start its journey all over again. Similarly, the person who has assimilated knowledge. He can transact with the world. So, not assimilated knowledge, we'll call it prajna. The person who has understood that he is Brahman, but the knowledge has not been completely assimilated. So, he's a prajna, but he is not sthita prajna. Prajna is a person who has the knowledge. Sthita prajna is a person for whom the knowledge is assimilated. So, this is a prajna. He has finished Shravanam and Mananam, but not Nididhyasanam. He's in the process. And therefore, he can transact with the world freely. But sometimes there are occasions when raga, dvesha, kama, krodha, provocations will be there. The ego will become strong. So normally, the prajna, because of his knowledge, would not like to argue. But unwittingly, prarabdha-wise, sometimes you will find that you are in an argument. And once you get into an argument, you cannot go back. And therefore, he says, the moment you get into an argument, what does he do? Kurma angani samharate eva. He withdraws the 5 sense organs, sarvashaha, from all the 5 directions. This chadaka is, the threat is to what? The threat is to his disturbance of mind, to his knowledge. That is what the threat is. So whenever any strong attachment or emotion is perceived, becomes possible because of the situation which you are facing, Krishna is saying, become the tortoise. Remember that all emotions are okay only within the framework of dharma. And it is better to prevent than trying to filter. So you prevent. You have to be choosy with regard to your sensory interactions. Right? So he says, Indriyani Indriyarthebhya. This person, a prajnaha, he withdraws the sense organs from sense objects intelligently, judiciously, because prevention is always easier than curing. Right? Just say no. Because the first time it is easy to say no, like to drugs or to cigarettes. The first time it is easy to say no. The second time the cigarette or the drug has become stronger and I have become weaker. First time when I say no, I am acting from a position of strength. Second time I have become weaker. And the main example in the Ramayana for this is Vali. Vali and Sugriva, right? Vali had a boon that whichever enemy he faces, 50% of the strength of the enemy goes to Vali. And therefore, if you do the math, how can Vali ever lose? Because 50% of the enemy's strength has come to him, and then he has his own strength also. So already it's lost, right? That Vali is the addiction. So every addictive thing, as long as it is not in front of you, you are strong. But the moment that drug or the cigarette comes in front, half of the strength is gone. And therefore, Shastra says, in the beginning, do not confront, prevent. Say no in the beginning. And therefore he says, Yaha indriyani indriyarthebhya samharate tasya prajna pratashtitha bhavati. A person who is able to control his sense organs, for him, knowledge will become steady in no time. So with this, I will stop. Any questions? Very, very deep verses, giving the sadhana for becoming a Sthita Prajna.
So,
Yeah.
the shell of this, which is the tortoise shell, which is compared, is it a strong mind or is it the 3-step sadhana which you just said?
The tortoise shell is being compared to you withdrawing the sense organs from the sense objects. You are not exposing it to temptation.
Okay.
If the mind was very strong, then you would not need the Indriya Nigraha. That Shama is strong, then Dhamma is not needed. Dhamma is needed only as long as Shama is not completely established.
And so Nididhyasanam, we can say like ruminating, go over it again and again.
You have to recall the teaching. It is like putting, my favorite example. You put a lime pickle in the sauce, in the juice, and leave it. If you just dip and take it out, nothing is going to happen. There will be no taste. But if you leave it in the pickle for 7 days, 10 days, then every fiber of the lime becomes embedded with the juice. Then only it's a pickle.
Absorption, assimilation.
Similarly, that knowledge, your head has to be dipped into the knowledge and kept dipped inside for a long time. Then only all the negative tendencies, all the habitual thinking patterns, all the vasanas, they'll be destroyed only when it's in constant touch with the knowledge.
Yes, thank you.
Om Acharya ji,
Haji.
when we say all emotions are okay within the framework of dharma, what does that imply?
Well, you can love your child very strongly, but not be attached. You can love your husband strongly, but not be attached. Dharma says, don't be attached. If you're not attached, you can love. We had a very long discussion on this, where in the
Chapter 1.
first chapter.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Acharya ji.
Acharya ji.
Haji, John, tell me.
When we mentioned today about Sama, Dhamma, Veda, and Danda.
No, Samadhamma is different from this. That Samadhamma is Tattva Bodha. Sama, Dana, Veda, Danda is Chanakya Nati. Sama means, there it means your dialogues. Sama in Tattva Bodha is different meaning.
Okay.
Dana means charity or bribing also. Veda means creating differences in the enemy. And Danda means the stick, punishment. So that's common to Chanakya Nati. That's a way of dealing with the enemy according to Chanakya.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So with this we'll stop. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam
Purnamidam
Purnat
Purnamudachyate
Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vasishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you, Ji.
Tat Sat.
Thank you,
Om Namah
Ji.
Shivaya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Acharya.
Thank you, Acharya.
Thank you, sir.